Hey everybody, welcome. In today's video, I want to talk to you about the newest version of LRTimelapse. That's right, LRTimelapse version number 6. It was just released a few weeks ago. It has lots of new features, including performance. In fact, I got a great tool to test performance on. I was lucky enough to get my hands on the brand new Apple Mac Studio, and this guy has the M1 Ultra in it. And let me just tell you, this thing is fast. LRTimelapse 6 performs insanely well on this machine. Not only that, I'm going to share with you some of the new features, what I love about the software, what I could definitely see some improvements on, and then finally, a lot of you are going to ask me whether you should upgrade or not. And I'll give you my honest answer to that question at the end of the video as well. Before we get started, I just want to give out a quick disclaimer and let you all know that I'm an affiliate of LRTimelapse. And what that means is that they've given me a promotional license that allows me to use the software unrestricted. That way I can give you a more complete review. If you are to click on any of the links that I have in the description below to purchase LRTimelapse or to upgrade your license of LRTimelapse, then understand that those are affiliate links, which means at no additional cost to you, you can purchase the upgrade or purchase the software, and then a portion of that will come back to me to help support this channel. So now that we got that out of the way, I just can't wait to share with you, or show you, I should say, the performance of this software on this brand new machine, because it blew my mind. So let's get started. All right, so one of the first things you might notice when using LRTimelapse 6 for the first time is a noticeable performance improvement. In fact, let me go ahead and load a sequence. This is one that I haven't loaded into LRTimelapse yet. And notice that there's a noticeable performance improvement. At least I noticed it. In fact, if you still don't believe me, go to my blog where I did my LRTimelapse review, and I have a MacBook Pro and a Mac Mini kind of in a comparison video where it shows that it loads the same exact sequence faster in LRTimelapse 6 than they do in LRTimelapse 5. So definitely check that out. But if you still don't believe me and say, you know what, Brian, that's only 166 frames, load something bigger. Well, we're gonna reload this time lapse to show you how quickly it can reload a time lapse in LRTimelapse 6. This is just absolutely mind-blowing. And while it's loading, let me just tell you this. The reason why things load faster in LRTimelapse 6 is that LRTimelapse 6 can take advantage of the cores you have in your computer. So the more your computer chip has as far as cores, the faster performance. Also, if you have a fast solid state drive in your computer, the faster your solid state drive, the better performance. So in other words, more cores and faster SSDs equal better performance. This computer has an extremely fast solid state drive as well as 20 cores, and we're taking advantage of all 20 of it. Finally, one note I want to make is if you're an Apple M1 user, you might as well upgrade to LRTimelapse 6. And the reason for that is LRTimelapse 6 takes full advantage of your computer. It runs natively. No longer does it run in the Rosetta emulation like in LRTimelapse 5. And that in itself is going to give you a noticeable performance improvement. And again, if you don't believe me on that, check out those videos on my blog, on my LRTimelapse review, which I'll have a link to in the description below. So let's continue. Let's go back to this short time lapse so that I can process it and render it out in real time to show you how quickly this is, and also point out a couple of the new features along the way. So before I get started with this time lapse, let me just make one last disclaimer. If you've never used LRTimelapse before, this is not a tutorial. It's already gonna, or I should say, I'm already gonna assume that you know how to use this software, at least the basics. So if you don't know how to use it, then check out a tutorial on LRTimelapse.com. There's some great ones there, or hopefully in the future, I will make my own. So back to this short time lapse that we're going to edit. I'm going to click on Keyframe Wizard, and you'll notice we have only 2 workflows. He's definitely streamlined that for us, which is nice. 99% of us are going to use the visual workflow. And this is also a Holy Grail time lapse. So we want to click on the Holy Grail Wizard, which we've done there, and that looks pretty good already as default. So we'll leave it at that. And again, I'm going through this really quickly, and the reason for that is I want to show you real time without wasting your time how this Mac Studio or any fast computer that you have out there is going to absolutely fly with LRTimelapse 6. So let's continue. You may also notice as I was talking, it automatically loaded, I should say, a visual preview for our 3 keyframes. That's a new feature too. That has to do with using these new sliders on the right. Again, I'm not going to really go into depth on this, but you can technically edit the entire time lapse using these sliders if you like. More on that in just a second, but I'm going to edit this the way I normally would. So let's continue. So following the workflow, we hit Holy Grail Wizard, and now we need to save and then go into Lightroom. So we're going to go back into Lightroom. I'm going to highlight all my files, and again, for time, I've already imported it into Lightroom, and I'm going to click on Read Metadata. And like in previous versions, this one also adds a 4-star for a keyframe. We can even just bring up our keyframes only, and then I'm going to fly through and edit this real quick. I am not speeding up the video. I'm going to continue to talk so that you know I'm not speeding up the video. And I'm going to apply a really basic edit. This is not going to be 100% how I would normally edit, but for the sake of time, that's what I'm going to do. So I straighten the horizon. I hit automatic on the tone curve. Let's see, let's change the white balance just a little bit. Maybe increase the brightness just a tad. Let's go to the tone curve and just make a couple of adjustments. You know, maybe something like that. And again, I'm doing this really quick. So we'll call that good. That looks pretty good. I'm not clipping any highlights and I don't have really any major shadows. So let's go ahead and apply this to the second frame. Again, editing this very quickly. And that looks a bit bright to me. So let's bring down the brightness because we are gradually getting darker. And then maybe change the white balance again. The airport added these new LED lights, and so they're really nice white light. Maybe down just a tad. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's sync it to the next frame. And again, let's see, bring down the brightness maybe a little bit, and then adjust the white balance to show the white light a little bit better. There we go. That looks pretty good. Again, I edited that very quickly, but I'm going to go ahead and highlight them all, save them, and then you'll notice there was a blue bar. And what happened? It automatically reloaded our sequence. We no longer have to hit the reload button, which was right here. It's actually moved over to the right. And the reason for that is you really don't need it much anymore. There's a few situations you might need it, but most of the time it automatically does it for you. New feature in Lightroom, or in LRTimelapse 6, I should say. Now we're going to hit auto transition like we've done in the past, and it's automatically going to start creating visual previews for the entire sequence. And what was really mind-blowing to me is look how fast my new Mac Studio is. It's like a dealer just taking cards and doing this. This is mind-blowing. In the past, I would see a few frames pop up and then they'd dance and then disappear. I mean, this is crazy. Notice how we are done that quick. We're done. Now I can go in and clean it up. Well, actually, let's look at it real quick. Is there a little bit of flicker? Yeah, there's a little bit of flicker, but this is actually pretty clean of a time lapse. So what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to add a reference area to our sky so these bright lights down below don't interfere. And then I'm going to hit Visual Deflicker, and let's go ahead and make this follow the natural curve. And then I'm going to hit 4 so that we can use the multipass. And you'll notice that automatically it already came up with multipass and my previous default setting. In other words, whatever you do here last time, it's going to remember that and it's going to default to that, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to hit apply, and again, notice we are going through the first pass, and wow, this is absolutely incredible. Look at this. It's loading so fast. We're already done with the first pass, and it's already beginning the second pass. And here we go. It's maximizing the CPU, which, by the way, the Mac Studio, if you're hearing any noise, oh, we're done. That was 3 passes like that. All right, so we are now done with the Visual Deflicker. I said 3 passes, it's actually 4. I don't know why I just said that, but you might be sitting there going, Brian, you know, that's only 166 frames. That's great, your computer fan noise was quiet, but you really didn't push your computer to the limits for very long, at least. And so let's go ahead and do this other time lapse, the Grand Canyon one that's 815 frames. And let's let that load. And while it's loading, let's go back over to Lightroom. And I'm going to bring up this Grand Canyon time lapse. In fact, I've already edited this so that we can speed up this whole review process, and that way you're not waiting on me to edit it like the other one. In fact, that sequence I believe is already loaded, so yes, it's loaded. So I'm going to go ahead and save my frames, and then we're going to come back over to LRTimelapse, and you'll notice this time it actually didn't reload. And the reason I believe is the case is I began working on this one before I did this video, and it's not going to reload it, I guess, if I've kind of left and come back in. So that's maybe where the reload button will come in handy. So I'm going to hit reload. I now see my edits on my, at least my first keyframe, my middle keyframe, and then there should be one at the end. And then I'm going to hit auto transition like we did on the first time lapse. And just like we did with the reload button, it's not going to automatically this time load the visual previews. And if it doesn't automatically start, obviously just hit the visual preview button. And this is going to take a little bit of time. So while it's doing this, because I want to keep this in real time and not speed things up to show you the performance of LRTimelapse 6 on this computer, let me talk about a few of the other features. For starters, a lot of you are going to be curious about this internal workflow. For starters, let me just say this. If you're going or thinking about upgrading, I should say, to LRTimelapse 6, for this particular feature, I probably wouldn't do that personally. And I'll explain why in just a second. There's a lot of reasons to upgrade to LRTimelapse 6. That wouldn't be one of them. It's a cool feature, but personally, it's not something that I would use, and I honestly don't see a lot of pros using it because it has a lot of limitations, especially with these sliders. For starters, when you move the slider, and I'm not going to, it has to regenerate the keyframe. Not only that, it doesn't move up 0.01, it moves up about 0.10, but it's kind of random. And again, every time you make a change, it has to reload a keyframe. And even on a fast computer like this, it's still pretty slow. Lightroom is going to be a lot faster. You'll also notice we don't have every slider, like there's no tone curve in here. So if you're used to using the tone curve, we don't have that. You also don't have a lens correction tool, which is very important for this time lapse because without the lens correction, this looks pretty bad. And so that, again, another limitation, not trying to bring this down. That's pretty impressive that this has been added to LRTimelapse. But I will say this, even though it's not a feature I'm going to be using right now, it might be something that gets better with newer versions of LRTimelapse. A lot of features over the years, such as visual previews, has gotten better over the years. I think it was just regular previews. No, if I think right, I don't think there even was such thing as visual previews. You had to like export the time lapse and just hope that it was right. And then visual deflicker used to be just deflicker, and we didn't have multi-pass deflicker. So all these things were features that first started out with just as a basic feature, and then over the years they've improved. So there's always a good possibility that this is going to improve. But now that we've done the visual preview, and that loaded very quick, let's go ahead and do the multi-pass deflicker on this one. That looks pretty good to me. 4 passes again, and I'm going to hit apply. And while it's doing the deflicker again, notice again, this clock is going down really fast. We're going to be through the first pass in less than 2 minutes just because this thing is flying. Again, just like the visual previews, it's insanely fast. But back to this, as I said, it's a bit clunky. Gunther himself will tell you that it is not what does it try to say? It does have limitations. You're using a visual preview, which is a very low resolution, so you're not going to be able to see the details of your image like you would in Lightroom to make adjustments. But it is a feature. If you don't have Lightroom, then you can definitely edit and finish / render your time lapses all within the internal workflow. In fact, let me click on this real quick. I believe this computer can handle it at the same time. And this is going to bring up the internal export and render current sequence. So technically, when this was done doing its deflicker, I could export it right now. However, the limitation is I don't get to use any of these settings over here. It just automatically exports as a JPEG, 8-bit Rec 709. So that's not a very high quality, and you're going to get a good chance of getting color banding here in the gradients. So you probably don't want that. unless you need something really quick. And even then, if you have a fast machine, I would just do the Lightroom export and just do it the highest quality version you possibly can. The other feature you're going to get, again, while we're still waiting for the Deflicker to finish, is we now can do different aspect ratios. We used to only be able to do 16:9. Now you can actually do all kinds of ones for like a cinematic look, like 2.5, or you can even do vertical video. Maybe you want to post this to, I don't know, Instagram Reels or TikTok or something. You could do that. So that's definitely there. I'm going to switch it back to 16:9. And wow, we are already done with the multi-pass deflicker. So that didn't take very long at all. Okay, so we're back in Lightroom. We're going to highlight all our frames, and then I'm going to click on Read Metadata, and it's going to bring all the edits that we just made with the deflickering and all that. And then I can now export this sequence. So I'm going to highlight all the frames now that we've brought it back in. I'm going to click on Export. And we're going to just click on this preset because I want 16-bit TIFF. I'm going to make sure that's the folder. Yep, that's the folder we want. So I'm going to hit export. And what I'm going to do while it's exporting is I'm going to bring that folder up, and so we can see how many frames it's creating as it renders out. So we've already done 6 in just that short period of time. And let me just make that a little bit smaller, and let's do a list. There we go. So we're going to watch that as I go back into LRTimelapse, and I'll point out a couple more features while this is exporting. And notice again, this multi-core computer is not loud. This is pretty processor intense, and we're already 30 frames into. So 1 second in, I probably won't even be able to tell you all these features yet. But a couple of the features that are pretty cool is notice how busy this is right here. And so you might say, you know what, I only work with my time-lapse working folder. How do I get rid of all this clutter? Well, you can now in LRTimelapse 6. And for pro users, this might be a reason to upgrade because it's nice to have organization, in my opinion. You click on Restrict Folders, which I already have, and I want my time-lapse working drive to be the folder that I restrict. I then have to quit LRTimelapse, start it up again, no problem. This is crazy. Like normally I feel like this export would just make this computer hang, or my old computer hang, and it did. It's not doing that anymore. In fact, notice we now just have the 2 time lapses in my working folder. The other feature you have is if you leave your mouse over a time lapse, it'll give you a preview of what you have for that time lapse, so you can kind of remember what it is. Another thing you can do is you can right click and click on a folder ready or folder rating, or you can use these key shortcuts. So maybe something that I'm like, I need to work on right now. This is a really good one. I might mark with 3 stars, or maybe something that I think is, you know, really cool and want to share right away. Maybe I give a thumbs up. You know, you can have your own system, but that's definitely a feature you can use. And looks like we're about 3/4 of the way done now. So definitely a lot of features that is now in LRTimelapse 6, and historically speaking, a lot of these new features are only going to get better as time goes on. And wow, that's pretty incredible. We're at 958, 959, started at 956. So we are, looks like it's towards the end of the 56. So we'll call it maybe 56.5. I don't really know, but so I'd say we're a minute and a half. So we're about 2 minutes into this right now, give or take a few seconds, and we are almost done. So my guesstimate was about 3 minutes, and wow, we're already done. That's pretty incredible. You now have these presets that you can use, and you can just click on them and you can switch between them quickly. In fact, let's say you want to make your own presets. So I have my 6K one, that's for my A7 IV that can do 6K time lapses now. But I also have some clients that I have to send HD stuff to. So they want ProRes, but they want 1080p, they want a good quality, and they want 2997. And then they actually want Rec 709 for what they do. So I can make that preset, and let's just call it for, it's a news company that I use, 4. They just want that. I can then type however I want for the name of it, and then I click this plus button, and now I have my own preset that I can switch between very quickly. But let's go quickly back to 6K. A great reason to use the the presets, I should say. Another thing that I think is and as I mentioned, you now get different aspect ratios. So let's say we wanted to do a cinematic. I can move this around and it'll force the crop, which is kind of cool. And maybe down the road, we'll be able to animate this, you know, with keyframes or something. That would be kind of cool to do. But obviously you can do that in Lightroom as well if you want. But I'm gonna go back to 16:9 and bring it all the way down because our sky is the main, our sky is not the main focus, it's the airplanes here. I'll leave the motion blurred on. These are all settings we had in LRTimelapse 5. But again, we get the aspect ratios in LRTimelapse 6. And then I'm going to click on Render Video. And just like we had with the exporting, this thing is going to render so fast. Look at this. This is incredible. So while this is rendering out, the last thing I was telling you that I would talk about is whether you should upgrade or not. And this is just my personal opinion. For starters, if you're a professional, you definitely want to upgrade. And the reason for that is you're going to not only get major performance improvements, but you're also going to get like folder organization tools that's going to declutter this area of your LRTimelapse panel, but also you can have these little folder icons, which might sound a little cheesy, but let's say you're going through and you're, whoop, we're already done. Let's say you're going through and there's certain time lapses that your client wants you to export right away. You can mark those with these different icons, which is pretty cool. The other thing that I like about this is how it automatically brings stuff back in, especially when you're editing a new time lapse. So I think that's pretty cool. So again, if you're a pro user, definitely upgrade. It's worth it in my opinion. All right, so the next thing you might be asking me is, you know what, Brian? I'm not a professional user. I just am a hobbyist. I have a private license, a version 4 or 5. Do I really need to upgrade? Well, let me answer this question with a question. I know that's probably not the best way to do it, but normally if you were in front of me asking that question, I would respond to you by saying, you know what do you do with your time lapses after you publish them? Do you put them online? Do you put them on social media? Do you put them on a blog? If the answer is yes to any of that, then you might consider cross-grading your license from whatever version you have up to a pro version of LRTimelapse 6. And what that means is if you have a private license, let's say of version 4, what you can do is you can upgrade it not only to version 6, but you can upgrade your license from a private license to a professional or pro license. And so that's kind of a unique upgrade feature that is offered by LRTimelapse, which is pretty cool. And the reason I say that and why you might consider upgrading is, think of it this way. The more people that see your work, the higher chance you're going to have of finding somebody that's going to want to purchase it. If you put it on YouTube, you put it on social media, you have the chance of reaching an audience of millions, if not billions of people. I don't know how many users are on the platform, but you never know what's going to happen to your video or who it's going to get in front of, and it would be a shame that somebody would want to license it and you're not able to export it at a higher quality that they want, or technically with a private license, you're not allowed to sell your work. It's for private use only. So cross-grading your license from a private version of LRTimelapse 4 or 5 to a pro version of LRTimelapse 6 may be a good idea. Spend that money, and then down the road you could say, you know what, anything and everything I publish from here on out, I can now sell if somebody gets interested in it. And the next thing you might be saying to me is, you know what, Brian, I don't publish a lot of time lapses. Nobody's going to be interested in the 1 or 2 that I publish. Well, let me tell you this. I had one time lapse that I published. It was a pretty cool weather event, but I didn't expect it to go viral like it did on Facebook. It went viral. I had people from all kinds of news organizations around the world, to filmmakers, to documentaries that wanted to license this clip, and they're still interested in it. I think I've licensed it over 2 or 3 dozen times. It has a lot of interest, and it would have been a shame that had I not had a pro license at the time, I wouldn't have been able to sell my work for a viral video. So you just never know what's going to happen. Like I said, I had one time lapse that I published, didn't think anything of it. And then a few hours later, when I was checking my Facebook, I was like, oh my goodness, I have over 10,000 notifications. What is going on? Have I been hacked? And instead, it was the #1 trending item on Facebook. And that was a pretty cool experience to have. But again, consider cross-grading your license from a private version of 4 or 5 to LRTimelapse 6 Pro. Enough about that. Maybe you're the person that says, you know what, Brian, I don't ever think I'm going to license my work or sell my work. In fact, I know I'm not going to. I'm not into that. I just do this for fun. Should I upgrade? My answer to you is this: probably not. If all you're doing is doing this for fun, you don't think you're going to upgrade, then version 4 and 5 are outstanding versions of LRTimelapse. They are some of the best versions that he has made to date, with lots of upgrades. So maybe you hold tight. If you're version 4, then maybe you upgrade to version 6 if you want a little bit better software. But honestly, if you're just a private user, you probably don't need to upgrade unless you think you might sell your work, or one big if, or I should say, or if you have an M1 Mac. And if you have an M1 Mac, then you might as well upgrade. And if you're going to do any upgrade, I'm just going to say this: while you're spending the money, if you have it, regardless of the situation, just consider upgrading to a pro license. That way down the road, if or when you might sell your work, or maybe you'll get more into this, you can then put your work on like stock video websites. There's lots of them online, and you can make some extra money to not only support your hobby, but you can make some extra money that eventually might pay for the upgrade in itself. So definitely something to consider. But other than that, I think that's all I have for this video. I didn't want it to be super long. I do thank you for watching this. And if you want to be informative to me, I should say, and let me know how I'm doing, put a comment in the description below. Let me know how you like this video, how I can improve. But also, if you want to see future videos in the future, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell if you want to be notified. That way you won't miss any video. But seriously, I love feedback. If there's any way I can improve this, just let me know. I'm still new to this whole YouTube thing and these tutorial things, so let me know how I can do better. But other than that, thank you for watching. Appreciate your support, and we'll see you in the next video. Hey everyone, thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then please hit the like button. It lets me know to keep producing content like this. Also, feel free to share your thoughts on this video by commenting below. Finally, you can also support this channel by subscribing. Speaking of subscribing, if you like this content and don't want to miss any of my future videos, then click on the little bell icon so you'll be notified as soon as I publish my next video. Until then, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.